Tehran woke up today to a silence that felt nothing like the usual morning calm. It was heavier, darker, and full of a strange tension. At 3 a.m., emergency sirens blasted across the capital, shaking millions of people out of their sleep. Moments later, phones began lighting up. Every screen showed the same alert in bold red letters: "Zero day has begun." For a city of more than 10 million people, this message wasn't just alarming. It was catastrophic. It meant that Tehran had run out of water. Completely. No reservoirs, no functioning pipelines, no backup tanks. The entire water system of Iran's capital had collapsed in a single night. The next scenes in the city didn't look like anything normal. Highways were jammed with cars suddenly stopped in panic. People were running down streets carrying empty buckets, jugs, barrels, anything that could hold a few drops of water. Government loudspeakers announced that all central pipelines were dry, and the remaining emergency supplies would only be distributed at a handful of crisis centers. Millions of people rushed into the streets. Social media turned into a live broadcast of chaos. Videos showed city fountains dried to dust, public taps dripping nothing, and the once iconic Azadi Square surrounded by crowds desperate for water. Drone footage captured cracked riverbeds and abandoned water pumps. This wasn't a drought anymore. It was a total urban collapse. When the spokesperson for Iran's water ministry appeared on television, his face said everything before he even spoke. He looked exhausted, frightened, and uncertain. When he finally addressed the country, all he said was, "We have entered 0 day. Citizens must remain calm and follow emergency instructions." But calm was impossible. Tehran was already slipping into panic. Within hours, small fights turned into citywide conflicts. People clashed in lines waiting for water trucks. Some tried to break into government water storage facilities. Police officers struggled to maintain control, firing rubber bullets in several districts. People who had never imagined such a day were now fighting just to fill a bottle. Water, something everyone took for granted, had suddenly become more valuable than gold. The Jamkaran Reservoir, Tehran's primary backup supply, had officially dried up the night before. Climate change had played its part, but decades of mismanagement, decaying infrastructure, and political decisions that ignored early warnings had created the perfect storm. Water pumps installed more than 50 years ago had failed one after another. Pipelines carrying millions of liters of water daily had cracked and collapsed under pressure. By morning, more than 10 million people were without water. Hospitals were the first to enter full crisis mode. Reports began coming in that ICU wards had only 18 hours of water left. Dialysis machines were shutting down. Emergency rooms couldn't sterilize tools. A nurse live-streamed from a hospital basement, her voice shaking as she said, "If water doesn't come, our patients won't survive." The video spread across the world in minutes, pulling international media straight into Iran. Airports were drowning in crowds. People with money were trying to escape. People without it were standing in endless lines outside emergency stations, hoping to get a few liters of water for their families. Some were carrying sick children. Others had elderly relatives barely able to stand. Everyone's face showed the same expression: fear. As panic grew, so did the black market. Tehran's water mafia's small underground groups that had long existed in the shadows took over the city. Prices skyrocketed overnight. A plastic gallon that normally cost less than $1 was suddenly selling for 20 times more. Government forces raided several warehouses, but enforcing the law was becoming impossible. When even police officers didn't have drinking water, control became an illusion. One particular video broke millions of hearts. A mother sitting in a dark apartment was trying to calm her crying children. Their lips were dry, their eyes red from dehydration. "Water will come soon," she whispered, but the children were crying louder, sobbing the same word, "Water, water." That clip alone triggered international outrage. Foreign governments and NGOs called for an emergency response, but Iran's political isolation made immediate help nearly impossible. Cargo planes full of water needed clearances. Border controls slowed everything, and the crisis was growing faster than anyone could respond. Then came the most shocking move so far. Iran activated its mass evacuation protocol. This emergency system is usually reserved for war scenarios or natural disasters like major earthquakes. But today it was for water. The government announced that certain districts of Tehran must begin relocating immediately. Within hours, buses lined major highways, ready to evacuate thousands. People were seen leaving their homes with only plastic bags carrying documents, a few clothes, and whatever tiny containers of water they could manage to save. Streets were filled with heartbreaking scenes: families separated, elderly pushed in wheelchairs, children crying, pets abandoned, neighbors hugging as they prepared to leave their homes, possibly forever. Tehran, a city once proud of its modern infrastructure, metro systems, and economic ambitions, now looked like a giant refugee camp. Dams had dried, rivers had vanished, the urban planning system had collapsed. Experts came forward saying that Tehran's population had grown too fast, while water supply stayed the same or even decreased. The crisis wasn't sudden, it was inevitable. Underground metro stations, usually full of life, now looked like surviving bunkers where people gathered to escape the heat. Internet networks were failing as millions tried to find information. Fuel supplies for generators were running low. Even bread factories were shutting down because water was needed to produce dough. Crime rates shot up. Groups began patrolling rooftops, guarding whatever water containers they had. Some neighborhoods formed community watch teams. Others surrendered to chaos. People were stealing water from parked cars, from gardens, even from broken air conditioning units. Then, during an emergency briefing, the government said something that shocked the world. If we do not receive rainfall or international assistance in the next 72 hours, half of Tehran will collapse. That meant hospitals shut down, transportation halted, businesses closed, and millions of people forced to flee. The city was standing at the edge of total failure. International headlines exploded. Iran's capital becomes world's first mega city to run out of water. Tehran faces the largest urban water collapse in modern history. UN holds emergency session on Iran's zero-day crisis. But words, meetings, and warnings couldn't help the people trapped inside the city. Night fell on Tehran, and the city's lights began to fade. Electricity grids started failing due to lack of cooling water in power plants. People lit candles on balconies. The sound of crying, shouting, and sirens filled the air. One by one, neighborhoods slipped into complete darkness. Zero day was no longer just a government alert. It was now the nightmare reality of millions. As the city struggled through the night, drones captured a horrifying sight from above, a mega city slowly dying. Streets once full of cars were now dry, cracked pathways. Rivers had turned into deserts. Parks looked like wastelands. Tehran, a city that never imagined running out of water, was officially collapsing. Families huddled together on rooftops, talking about the futures they no longer understood. "Will we ever come back?" one boy asked his father as they prepared to evacuate. The father remained silent. He didn't know the answer. Zero day had changed everything. For the first time, Tehran was experiencing what scientists had warned the world about. When a megacity's water supply fails, Everything fails: hospitals, transport, food, safety, life. Experts say this may only be the beginning. If countries do not plan for water security, Tehran will not be the last city to fall. It will be the first chapter of a new global crisis. Tonight, the only question echoing through Iran's capital is, will Tehran survive, or is this the end of the city as we know it? Time will answer, but one thing is already certain. Zero day has rewritten Iran's history.